Hello and welcome back to my channel. Please bear with me for this video because I have slept neither well nor for long, but I have remembered to put my light on this week, so that's an improvement. Last week I mentioned that a friend of mine lent me some Emily McIntyre books, the Never After series to be exact. Yesterday I finished reading Hooked, and well, it's a dark contemporary romance, and I've never read any dark romance before. I've heard of it, of course, seen some horrific ones, and yeah, it was a surprise. Literally all I knew before I picked it up was that it was a twisted tale and there was some level of spice in it. And oh boy, was there some level of spice in it. People might think, oh, you sweet summer child, when I say this, but I think I'm rating this 4.5 out of 5 for level of spice rating. Luckily for the novel even starts, there's a bit of a warning, including the fact that it's not a retelling and the villain is a villain. There is no sweet redemption arc. He's a villain through and through. It says read discretion is advised, and if you want a full list of the trigger warnings, you can go to her website. So I was pretty thoroughly warned. Also at the beginning of the book is a playlist of songs. I'll put them on screen now and probably in the description below. I haven't listened to it yet, but it's my first book with such a thing and I found it interesting. As I said, it's not a twisted tale or a retelling of Peter Pan, but it's simply heavily referenced throughout. The main protagonist is, of course, Hook, but his given name is James Barrie, a clear reference to J.M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan. The female protagonist, it should come as no surprise, is Wendy, daughter of Peter. The Jolly Roger is a bar that's essentially a front for Hook and his gang, where the two meet. She's 20, wearing a blue dress. He's 26 and recognises her. His plan, as stated on the back of the book, is to seduce the girl and use her for his revenge. Some people might find the age gap a little bit too much. 6 years isn't too bad, but I understand why people might find it a bit icky when one of them is so young at 20. But honestly, if you have a problem with that, you probably have a problem with most of the book. It's very vulgar and quite graphic. One thing that I found a little odd, but not too bad, was that Hook's British, and it's graphic, and there was no mention of his Britishness downstairs, if you get what I mean. Sure, it's possible it simply didn't mention he's Jewish or something like that, and there's nothing that specifically states that makes it so that he's not. It was just something I was expecting that didn't happen. Speaking of expecting to happen though, the book was fairly predictable. Probably about a 7 out of 10. There were some things in the conclusion that I didn't see coming, but others might have because it was alluded to beforehand. But around halfway through I had multiple theories on a certain thing and I thought it'd be one or the other, but both ended up coming true. The biggest con of this book though, in my opinion, is a scene where a character appears to have 3 hands. I'm not going to go into what is actually happening as that would involve pretty heavy spoilers, but rather use an example. In one hand he is clicking a pen. In the other, he is scrolling on his phone. It continues like this for a while, and then he picks up his drink. No mention of which hand is which for any of this, by the way. I assumed it was with his phone hand. Then it is mentioned that he's still holding it, therefore suggesting it was the pen-clicking hand. Then another character mentions that she wished he'd stopped clicking the pen, so I thought, okay, I guess he put down his drink. Nope, mentions again that he's holding it. It's possible that he was holding the pen and the phone in one hand, but I just don't see how that would work. It was a confusing scene to me, but it was the only one of its kind. All throughout there are cute little references to the original tale. I've already said a few: Hook, Wendy, Peter, and the Jolly Roger, but I'm not going to say any more because it was such a cute little treat every time one came up, and I don't want to spoil that feeling for anyone who might read this. Another pro is that all the spice felt like it had a purpose in the plot, and it had a lot of plot. I mean, actual plot, not the I watch it for the plot meme. I read it over the span of just over 24 hours and it took 267 minutes, which is 4.45 hours total, to read the 384 pages, which is faster than the speed at which I usually read. Part of that is due to the, larger font, larger easy to read font, and part of that is due to the action contained within. I was hooked, you might say. My overall rating for this book is going to be 3.5, which is actually the same rating I gave A Court of Thorns and Roses, for anyone interested but not keeping track. As I said, great plot, fun references, but some issues. Since I managed to read it so quickly, I thought I might try to read the entire rest of the Never After series this week. I have about 4 days I can dedicate to it and 4 more books to read. So I guess I better get started. The next one on the list, so publication order, is Scarred. It appears to be Lion King at no shock to anyone, I'm sure. The front has a crown on it, the special edition has a line on it, and the tagline is, "She doesn't belong to him, she belongs to the crown." Anyone who knows me knows I'm a pretty big Lion King fan, so I really hope this is good and doesn't leave my memories of the franchise scarred. Let's get started. I was just so focused on making sure I remember to put my light on, I forgot to plug my microphone in. So I recorded this whole thing about Scarred, and let's try that again. It's Tuesday now, and I did it. I finished the whole book in one day. I'm on track for the challenge. I realised also that I said I had 4 more books to read, and while that is true, there are 5 more in the Never After series, and I hadn't realised. This book, there is basically the same age gap between Tristan, who is Scar, and Sarah. He's 26 and she's 21. It's mentioned several times in Hooked that Wendy is almost 21, but it feels more equal in this. Sarah feels more grown up, and I'm sure that's by choice. Obviously I've said that Tristan is Scar, Sarah is Sarabi. In fact, the character's full name is Sarah Betro. Sarabi Tro. Sarah Betro. They feel like they start on even footing, partially because although Sarah is coming to the kingdom to marry King Michael Farser, she might actually be there for some nefarious purposes, which is mentioned in her first chapter. This isn't spoilers, don't worry. I forgot to mention this with Hooked, but these books, and I suspect the others, go between the 2 leads' perspectives. It's not 1 for 1, so it's not Tristan then Sarah, but it's not like 4 chapters of Sarah, 1 of Tristan, and then another 3 of Sarah. It's reasonably even. In Hooked, their attractions seem to be sudden and intense, but this is more of a slow build, and I love it that way. It's quite of an enemies to lovers, because they're both deeply connected to their shared enemy, King Michael, but they don't know that it's the other one's enemy. He's the other one's enemy. It's full of reference to The Lion King, of course, and I don't know if it's going to be visible in the clip that I recorded, but I felt my face light up at every single one of them. It's made me realise that I probably actually missed some in Hooked, because if I didn't know The Lion King as well as I do, if I wasn't as into it, then I might have missed some of these. In fact, I almost did miss some, so I'm certain I missed some in Hooked. I didn't find any of this really predictable, but I feel like there was somehow more emphasis on the characters in this one than the plot. There wasn't any mystery, we knew who wanted what, we didn't know when and how the others were going to find out about it and who would succeed. I liked this a lot more than Hooked, and I was all ready to give it 4 stars, but then there was this really unnecessary scene that felt unnecessarily long and in a nonsensical setting. It's hard to describe what was wrong with it without giving spoilers, so I'm afraid that's as far as I can go. But there was all that, and then there was a time skip pretty soon after that felt important. So we had all this stuff that didn't feel important and then skipping the stuff that did feel important. So for that reason, I have to downgrade it to a 3.5. I am, however, more likely to want to reread this than Hooked. So take from that what you will. It also reminded me at times of A Throne of Swans / A Crown of Talons by Catherine Elizabeth Core. Romance, treachery, and royal politics. Another book it reminded me of was How to Catch a Queen by Alyssa Cole, though that's a little harder to explain. It's more than just new queen comes in to marry new king. There's sort of the queen, not much is expected of her in either of them, and she is wilier than she seems in different ways, but still. Something that seemed a little strange to me at the beginning, but also sort of makes sense, is I assumed the characters were going to be black. It's set in a made-up kingdom, which, by the way, there's a map at the beginning showing it, and it's not really stated where anything else is in relation to it, so it could be in a completely made-up world as well. But it's the Lion King, it's Africa. I assumed black. Most of the voice actors in The Lion King are black, if I remember correctly, or at least Mufasa and Sarabi are. But there was a little bit of racism showing later on, but it did seem fleeting, so maybe that's what, I don't know. But they're described as pale cream coloured, so described more like Mufasa and Sarabi coloured than Scar coloured, and I guess that's why. I don't know. I'm hoping there'll be more representation in books to come, but we'll see. Because I don't think anyone in Hooked was black either. But I could be misremembering at this point. I've read a whole book since then. One short thing before I get started on this, however. One short thing is that there are some banger lines in both Hooked and Scarred. The ones in Scarred are a bit too late on to really say without giving spoilers, but the earliest one in Hooked is, "You learn quickly that immortality is only granted through people's memories." And this is not the sort of book I'd expect a line like that from. And don't get me wrong, there are better ones than that and stuff, but it's just a beautiful line that I wouldn't expect in something like this, that's all. Speaking of expectations, when it comes to Wretched, I'm expecting it to be sapphic, as the villain Wizard of Oz is the Wicked Witch of the West and the hero is Dorothy. Obviously it's not a twist tale or a retelling, but I'll be very disappointed if it turns into the Wicked Witch of the West and Derek or something. Although I did accidentally flip through a little bit, and I think one of the leads is called Nicholas. I'm hoping I misread, because that would be Wretched. And yes, I managed to get Hooked and Scarred in reasonably easily earlier, but I can't think of much else for Wretched. That's the best I've got. I am interested to see what the Wicked Witch's name is, assuming it's not Nicholas. Because Hook became James Barry after the author of Peter Pan. I feel like it might be a play on Ella Frank Baum, however that's pronounced. But we've already had Elphaba and Wicked, so I don't know. But I'm excited, so I'm going to get started. It's Wednesday and I have finished the book and I'm on track for the challenge. Wretched was an interesting one. It wasn't sapphic, as I'd hoped, and honestly, I'm not sure who the male lead was supposed to be. I would have expected Oz, but obviously it wasn't, because his name was Nicholas, aka Nick, also known as Braden, none of which say Wizard of Oz to me. But maybe I'm forgetting someone. Something I found interesting is lots of this seemed to be based on Wicked rather than the Wizard of Oz. Though I haven't read the Wizard of Oz, I'm pretty sure there are things like the Wicked Witch of the East doesn't have a name in it, and she does in Wicked. Speaking of names, first of all, the Wicked Witch of the West is named Evelina, which sounds enough like Elphaba that I think maybe it's based on that. She has two sisters, although we start at the funeral of one of them, Nessa, the other being Dorothy. And Nick's sister's name is Rose. So right there we have Nessa Rose. It's the only fun little reference I'll mention just because it's an example of how it seems to be based on Wicked. The story goes that Evelina and her family are criminals and Nick is a federal agent undercover, hence Braden. But the night before he's meant to start, he actually ends up meeting Evelina and doesn't recognise her. She doesn't give her his name and he gives her his actual name, Nick. So when she then meets him next couple of days, I'm not sure which, I can't quite remember, she finds out his name is Braden, so he starts out as a liar in her eyes, which obviously is an interesting dynamic. It's sort of an enemies to lovers, but he's the only one who really knows that they're enemies because he's undercover. He might be a liar, but she doesn't know he's an agent, which makes quite a lot of difference. It had some interesting family dynamics, and overall I had fun with it. I wasn't sure how it was going to end, and I'm happy with the way that it did. I'm still sticking with a 3.5 rating though. This took me the shortest amount of time so far, at just 239 minutes or 3.98 hours to read its 359 pages. I think I forgot to say how long Scarred took me, and that was 298 minutes or 4.96 recurring hours, but it was longer at 447 pages. As a reminder, it took me 267 minutes or 4.45 hours to read Hook's 284 pages. So Wretched took me less time to read around 80 more pages. Wretched also did have some gay representation, which, considering the whole Friend of Dorothy thing, makes sense and was kind of needed. But it didn't have a whole lot, and not all of it was good. There also appeared to only be one black character. At least only one person's skin colour was mentioned, so the fact that it was black makes me think that it was supposed to be like, this person looks different. But it was mostly filled with Irish Americans, and I think the assumption there is that they're white. I still think Scarlet is my favourite so far. Moving on to my expectations for Twisted, I don't really have many. I feel like the names might change a fair bit. Aladdin might become Aladdin, Jafar might become Jackson or something like that. I'm mostly interested in how the diamond in the rough will change. Will it be a person, a product, a jewel, a club? I am also expecting or hoping for some more representation of minorities. We'd have a bit more in Wretched than we had previously. And although I'm assuming none of Emily McIntyre's couples will be gay, as in the main lead, the main couple, I'm hopeful we might get more, or better at least. My only other expectation is a pretty minor one, and that is that someone will be referred to as crossed. Because in Hooked, someone was referred to as scarred, and I mean, I didn't really think much of it. The person was scarred. But in Scarred, someone was referred to as wretched, and I was like, huh. So I went into this expecting someone to be referred to as twisted, and it did happen. But I'm curious to know how someone is going to be described as crossed. Will there be some double crossing? I don't know. Anyway, with that, it is time to begin. Once again, another book down, another day down, and I'm still on track. Twisted is the book that's actually most like the Disney versions, in my opinion. It's got a bit of reference to specifically the 2019 live-action film as well. Yasmin is in love with Aidan, and her father, Ali, wants her to marry. He brings up suitors for her, and Julian, who is Jafar, wants Ali's legacy, and so thinks marrying Yasmin will get it for him, and plots to do so. In this case, though, Ali's legacy isn't a kingdom, but a diamond business. A dirty diamond business that he wants Yasmin to have no part in running. Therefore, since he's dying, he wants her to get married sooner rather than later, and whoever she marries can take over the company that currently Julian seems to be running. There's some representation in here, which would be weird if it weren't, bearing in mind it's based on Aladdin. Yasmin and Ali are described as having brown skin, and Julian and his family are described as having tan skin and are Italian Americans. I believe he's third generation, and there's no LGBTQ plus though. The age gap in this is the biggest yet. Wretched's age gap was actually bigger than the previous two, with Evelina being aged 24 and Nick 32. But in Twisted, Yasmin is aged 23 and Julian is aged 36, which does make a lot of sense when you bear in mind Jasmine and Jafar. This one is a proper slow burn. Neither of them wants the other, it's just a way for them to get what they actually want. And then they start getting muddled in their feelings, and I really enjoyed this. It had a similar sort of feeling as the emotions that Nick had in Wretched, but with both the characters feeling that way. One thing I have realised in these books, though, is that all the leads share the same mannerisms. They pinch the bridges of their noses, they lick their bottom lips. All the time. And the male lead seems to always sit the same way, and there's always something about the female leads when they get all riled up, and how much the male lead loves that. I will say though that the spy scenes do feel different between the different characters, as in the different books. Not massively so, but it doesn't feel like it's the same but with different names. I honestly found the same mannerisms and everything a bit distracting throughout, though if I hadn't read the other books I wouldn't have thought anything of it. I mean, I didn't in any of the other books. Well, not in any of the other books. I thought about it in Wretched. I didn't notice it in Scarred, I don't think. But since these are technically standalones, I'm trying not to focus on that too much because it's not a series, arguably, where all the characters are acting the same. There are a few mistakes in grammar, and one that's a special pet peeve of mine where it said disassociate when it means dissociate. And also I don't think that the author knows what hogtied means, or I don't, because somehow a character was hogtied while standing. Maybe it's me. I don't exactly participate in hog roasts or watch animals get branded, but it just seems... As I said, maybe I'm wrong. This one actually took me the longest so far, 301 minutes or just over 5 hours for the 421 pages. And I'm tempted to rate it a 4, though I'm aware that's probably more linked to my personal taste than anything even slightly objective. Essentially the same sort of thing as the others, but I really enjoyed the slow burn and the mixed emotions. Basically the things I've already said. Not the others didn't have mixed emotions, but I mean this specific mix. Now I have actually started Crossed because I had some time yesterday. I'm just over a quarter of the way through page 111 of 430 something. But I did write down my expectations first and they were pretty simple. The characters will pinch the bridges of their noses, lick their bottom lips, and the word hex will appear. Okay, joking aside, although that is still actually my expectations. This one's based on The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I have only seen the animated film once, and I have never read the book, so I'm not really sure what to expect in those terms. It also means that I don't have any clothing to match, which might have been obvious that I've been doing this week. The closest I have are these cross earrings, and technically I have a crucifix necklace, but I haven't worn that since I identified as Christian, so I'd feel weird wearing it. From where I'm at so far, we have had bottom lip licking, and I'm not sure about nose pinching, but we also have had the word hexed. We've got some disability representation, which we haven't had in the previous books, although, I mean, you could count Yasmin's father dying, but it's a completely different type of disability. I think I'll save all the rest of it until later, especially since I'm struggling to find the whole. And I'm excited to get started, continued, and I also need to because I don't have that much time. So, let's go! It's still Thursday afternoon to be more precise, and I have finished the book, and therefore finished the challenge. I mean, unfortunately I haven't read Hexed, but I know, and even day 2 that wasn't possible, so I don't think it counts. Before I go on as a series as a whole, I want to talk about specifically Crossed. I said before that I don't know the source material, so I couldn't tell you how many references there are throughout it, or who most of the characters are even. I know the male lead, Father Cade Frederic, is the priest. I don't actually know his name. My head just keeps saying Frodo, but I don't think that's it. I know it's something like that. I was going to look it up, but now I'm recording, I haven't. Female lead, Amaya, is Esmeralda, and her little autistic brother, Quinten, is Quasimodo. I almost forgot Quasimodo's name then. That's how unfamiliar I am with the source material. The story goes that 5 years prior to the story, Amaya and Quinn's mother left them. Just up and left her 19-year-old daughter with her 1-year-old son, after having basically convinced the town that her daughter, well, they should be distrustful of her in a very public outburst, as if a 19-year-old taking care of an autistic 1-year-old isn't difficult enough without having the town against her. Back to present day, Cade has become the priest in the town, and this town's cathedral is modelled after Notre Dame in Paris, where Cade grew up. This town is colloquially known as Little France. Like all of them other than Scarred, it predominantly takes place in America. As always, there was a draw between the two of them, but this time there was a different reason why they couldn't be together. Most of the others about them essentially being enemies or simply a means to an end, but here it was mostly just that he's a priest. There's definitely some predictability in this book. I think we're supposed to predict it. I'm still going to give it a 7 out of 10 rating for predictability, as I did with Hooked, but Again, I think that we're meant to predict crossed, but we weren't hooked. The others I didn't rate because there's nothing really to predict in them. I hope that makes sense. Ratings overall, I think I'll stick with the 3.5. That seems to make sense for these books. There were a couple of mistakes and things that didn't make quite sense, but it wasn't anything important. Now I'd like to take a moment to talk about the series as a whole. First of all, I want to say I don't think these books are necessarily made to be read one after the other in the way that I did. They're all technically standalones, even if they are called the Never After series. And I think if I hadn't read them the way I did, I might not have even noticed the annoying things in them. The same mannerisms, for example. However, I did realise that in, I can't remember how many books, it's mentioned that they'll belong to each other or love each other for all of their lives, as in plural lives, as in reincarnation. All of them have this possessiveness over one another, lots of those sort of tell me your mind type of things, so this could just be an extension of that. But I thought about it and it kind of works. The idea that all these characters are the same, just being reborn in an almost Our Infinite Fate sort of way. As far as I know, I've heard of the book because my copy hasn't arrived yet. The only one that mentions a year is Scarred, 1910. All the others mention mobile phones and some mention social media, but I don't think all of them, so it could totally be a timeline. Not in order, because Scarred is the second book and Hooked has mobile phones. But overall, just in a different order. Was that on purpose? I don't think so. Do I prefer it that way? Absolutely. I do feel like the first one might have been the darkest one, but it could also simply be that I wasn't prepared, I wasn't expecting it. It also sort of feels like it might have become less dark as the series progressed, but that could just be that I was getting used to it. One thing I'm grateful for this series for is that it showed me that there's a market for a book I'm writing. I thought it was a bit strange, maybe even a bit dark, but oh, sweet summer child that I was, it is nothing. Just remembered something that I didn't put in the video that I wanted to say is something that was really refreshing about the series is that the characters did actually smell different, which sounds a little bit weird. Well, two of them smelled of pine, but in lots of books I've been reading, the main male character smells of sandalwood, citrus, and some kind of spice, or at least a combination of them, and that wasn't the case in this series. They smell different from each other, and I don't think any of them were described as smelling of sandalwood, citrus, and pine. And spice. So, thumbs up for that. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you want to, and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you think about them in the comment section below or in a DM, whatever. And maybe we'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye.